Yeah, it wasn't bad, was it? Probably the closest some of you guys have sat in a while, huh? Because and that was what, 2 or 3 minutes of just being focused on one thing. What if you did that a couple of times a week? The really uncomfortable one is the next one, which is to do that with your face. I have like a face phobia or something. It's like
I would get slapped by my wife.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be real. Yeah, that's how that would go.
She's already reading that. So it's a real challenge to try to hold in there and stay in it with someone when it's feeling uncomfortable. It's kind of like how our sexual conversations go. We got to kind of stay in it. Now, there are uncomfortable sexual conversations, no question about that. But what if you just started holding hands and being able to sit on the couch and talk about that? Touching each other's face and being able to have that conversation. I often recommend this for about 3 or 4 minutes. It seems like eternity. But it's really good for people because it slows them down. It can be very arousing. It can be kind of enjoyable. It doesn't have sex at the end of it. That's a no-no in the process, especially in this room right now. Go on. Don't see it? But it's kind of nice. It's sensual. It's the things that we kind of need to be doing that we tend to drop off about after that second year, right? Everything they say, if you put a penny in a bank for every time you had sex between the first 2 years, and the next 7 years you could take 1 penny out every time you had sex, and it would take 7 years to empty the bank. We begin to stop doing these kind of fun things, and I'm hoping that's why you're here today, is to be able to put this back into your relationship on a regular basis. And you have to be mindful about it. You have to be able to talk about it. You can even go, hey, remember that hand thing? Let's do that. Let's do that. Do it with your feet. Someone could go on, it ain't gonna happen. Okay, well, there's other body parts you can do it, but it gross you out, that's fine. But this is the other part of this, is that's the how part of that. But there's the why, there's the what do we need to be talking about? And the thing is, I think it's a transformation from this old way of doing things to this new way of doing things, to have this new eyes and new perspective. Like Jonathan was saying, even taking that perspective of how God is doing, what he wants to do in our sexuality and our sex life, and bringing that into our bedroom and allowing him to do it. It's new eyes to something that maybe we've been doing for a long time. If the real voyage of discovery with each other consists not in seeking new landscapes, new places, new other things, but in having new eyes. Do you see the difference? Don't go looking out there and around for it. Put on new glasses. Have new eyes for your partner. See them differently because you're seeing them through God's eyes, not through, is this working or not? So what do we talk about? How did you learn about sex? I'll tell you how I learned about sex. We lived out in the boonies, and so my mother and dad worked way far away, so I was alone a lot at the house. And then one day I was in my mom's closet because she would never let me go in there when she was home. And so I went into her closet to look around because she wasn't there. And I found this book. It's back probably from the 60s. I mean, I'm old enough to be Jonathan's mother, but that's what I was telling him. I said, so it was an older book, and I found this book. So I memorized how it was on the shelf because I knew I had to put it back. My mother's very attentive to these things. And so I knew if I didn't put it back just right, she would know I looked at it. So I memorized this is a true story. I memorized how it went on the shelf, and I took it down, and I thought, this is cool, because I've never seen my mother read, so I didn't know she read that much. But it was a book on sex back from the 60s. And I just devoured that thing. And then later that summer, because I was home so much, I got back on the phone, actually plugged in the wall. I got a phone call. It was an obscene phone call. And this guy and I talked for quite some time. I'm a 12 to 13-year-old teenage girl home in the boonies of Florida alone, talking to an obscene phone call. It was rather interesting, and he was all more than willing to give me information.
You're like, no, I read that in chapter 4. I know exactly what you're saying right now,
Yeah,
sir.
it was just, it was like, and you look back and you go, how stupid can you be, you know? But that's kind of how I learned about sex.
See, I always wanted to know, why do you want somebody to blow on it? Because I learned from like my 6th grade friends. And I'm like, that just doesn't sound enjoyable.
I didn't know
Somebody blow
anything.
on
I was
it.
like, oh wow, I
Sometimes-
didn't know anything, man. I was like, totally nice. But I have a friend whose father's a doctor. He gives her a book and says, you know, girls don't need to know about sex, but just here, read this book. That was it. That was the whole sex talk. My friend Lori, she says, I learned about it from 80s movies. Think about that for a minute. That's frightening. That's just downright frightening, you know. Where do you learn about it? You get those things from home. You get these messages from your house, how you were raised, right? You get messages from school friends. You know where the average adolescent today, I just read this the other day in a paper, that the average adolescent today gets most of his sexual information, the most trusted sexual information, as he feels it to be. You know where he gets it from? His peers. That makes me feel really great. I don't know about you, but I want to know that my kid is trusting his friends to give him the best sexual knowledge. Right. Okay. Yeah. No. But isn't that true? Who did we go to? We heard it from our friends. We heard it from here. We picked up language. We started using that language. We have a lot of different languages for sex, don't we? We have the actual clinical terms, and guess what? Today we're going to talk clinical terms. We have a lot of slang for that. We have adult slang. We have adolescent slang. We have poetic words like the Song of Songs. Or it's very poetical, and you kind of know what they're talking about. There's the kind of language of euphemism. You know, we're going to go do it. You want to do it? You want to do it? Sure. That's incredibly romantic. Let's do it. You know, down there. Down where? Isn't that what we do though? We talk in those little code words and stuff like that. And so it gets to be where we begin to grow this belief system, we also grow this vocabulary. And you know that your belief system dictates everything else you do. What you believe to be true about something, whether we like that or not, and whether we agree with that or not, it really is true. But what you believe to be true is what you do. So if your beliefs about sex are that we don't talk about it, we do it with the lights off, and we never even mention it, but it better be good. We got some work to do, right? And the belief system we bring in from our childhood is very powerful. And you add into that, unfortunately, someone that may have distorted that, and now we have these really kind of walls and barriers up to deal with our sexuality and our sex. So what script was written for you in terms of your sexuality? Did your parents talk about it? You know, I tried to talk about it with my kids because it was, we came from families where it just was not talked about. But it was even difficult at that, and I was studying it at that point. And your kids don't believe you have sex either. You know that, don't you? Do you believe your parents had sex? I know everybody's like, yeah, too much. So what script was written? What script was written for you? Was it don't talk about it? Did you learn that, kind of the underlying current of that? Or was it free and flowing and talk about maybe too much? You need to talk about that with your partner. Not necessarily right now, but what do I tell myself about that? So, we need those new eyes, that new perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about, would you change it? There we go. How we have these clinical words. These are the clinical words for your body parts. And it's an interesting thing. I have my computer, I changed it over to get my Cortana to talk to me in British language. And so I changed the settings on my, so the word testicles is not in the English British dictionary. So it will never let us, if you can't even, then you have spell check for it. So I'm hoping that's spelled right. But your vagina, you have a penis, you have a vulva, you have testicles, we have a clitoris, we have intercourse, okay? There's lots of words. Okay, we're all gonna say those together, okay? Vagina, there you go, penis, vulva, testicles, clitoris, and intercourse. There we go. So we can all say them, and they're fine to say. Use the clinical language, and then take that into what's a private language for you. The reason that this is even an issue is so that when you take that next step to have the conversation with your partner, you know your body well enough to know what you're talking about. I was teaching this a couple of weeks ago to a Bible study class I meet with, and I was just kind of trying it out on them. And we were talking about the clitoris and that its only function is to basically have for sexual pleasure. And later then, she's about 70 plus years old. She goes, "What's a clitoris?" I said, "That thing that makes you feel good." And she goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, I know that." Okay. But we don't know our bodies that well because, again, maybe we're told not to touch our bodies. We're told not to explore. And I want to encourage you to do so. It is okay. It's in God's design. It's not off limits. So it's what we're going to do. We have that on.
It's in their book to make up their own words,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's like.
All right, so we're going to ask you to take a minute to look at this list with your partner. And in your book, there's these 2 boxes. And one, write down these words, these technical terms. And in the other box, I want you to discuss with your partner very quickly, just briefly. You don't have to go in great detail. What are words that you might use for that? What is your private language? Maybe it's the same thing. But maybe you have different euphemisms or little pet words, whatever you call them. In this next seminar, all words are charged. You know that? Okay. Yeah. Oh, no. I thought that was going to be. Never mind. All right, so take a few minutes. Oh, okay. Yes, I'll
Do you need some more salt and pepper on? Would that be helpful? That everybody's preferred go-to? Okay. Let me help you out. Let me get you going.
Yeah, that way nobody will hear you. What are the words that you use? If this is uncomfortable for you, I understand that. I get that. It comes out of our background, out of our history. It comes out of maybe, again, someone has given you some really bad information or done some things that have really distorted this whole picture for you. I get that. But my question is, why let them win? You win by making this part of your relationship new. Remember, God is for you. He's with you. He's in this. And it is for His glory. Is that you, Jonathan?
What? That's not me singing. But thank you for thinking I sound like Shane and Shane. They're my boys, so.
We're going to evaluate everything. Did you find some words that you could kind of agree on? That you could talk about? Maybe say some new ones, maybe create some new vocabulary. Let's talk a little bit about the other things in terms of sexuality, in terms of what do we need to talk about is body language. How do you know your partner wants to have sex? Is it just a question? Is it an announcement?
He wakes up.
And somebody say he wakes up. Okay, that just starts the day fine. And there's a comedian who says that how can men wake up with erections? How can they? How in the world do they want to have sex with us by how we look? And he said, because the reality is that there is no blood flow to the optic nerve at that point. They don't care. So this can get a little uncomfortable, and I just want to keep kind of monitoring that for you to tell you that, encourage you to keep going. It can be okay. Hopefully to make it fun. I think one of the things that we lose out of our sexuality a lot of times is the playfulness. And it becomes kind of like, okay, it's Thursday, or it's Friday, or it's Sunday afternoon. You know your parents had sex every Sunday afternoon when they said they were taking a nap. Threw you out the house, locked the door. Did your parents do that? Of course, you guys come from a generation where you don't lock anybody out of anything, do you? Right? Because you're like, something bad might happen. We lived in the country. My parents just locked the door and we just had to play outside. They were really probably doing that. Ew.
That's stuff.
That's stuff.
Yeah.
Taking that nap. How do you tell your partner? I have some friends who had a little jalapeno that would sit on their kitchen counter, and if it was green, that was a go. Either one of them could ask. If it was a red jalapeno, there was a no way that was going to happen. So they kind of would set the mood for the day with some little signal like that. I thought it was kind of fun. I wonder if they still have that. So how do you know? Do you know when your partner? How do you initiate that? Is it you wear something? You say something? Like you said, like the sun comes up. I mean, talk to your partner. I want you to think about it for a minute, and I want you to talk to your partner about that. Do you know? Are you aware? What are the signals that you notice? There's something that you noticed that you haven't maybe talked about or said anything about? Those are the nonverbal clues. They're important in your relationship, and they're important to talk about them. Maybe it's just you just go, hey, you want to have sex? It's good. I'm good. You're good. Are we going to have sex tomorrow? So being aware of your partner, but also going back to what I said a minute ago, is so important. Being able to have that time to sit down in your living room and one-on-one, face-to-face, have the conversation about what it is that we do or don't do, and what you enjoy and maybe don't enjoy. And that we can make even a plan maybe for the weekend of what we can do. Let's try. When you look at the last part of this, when we look at why do we need to be able to have a sexual conversation, we've looked at how, we've looked at what, and we look at why. And this right here is the reason. We should not be ashamed to talk about what God was not ashamed to create. I don't know a more powerful statement than that. Because this is, to me, where a whole lot of this gets distorted. And the world has taken it away from us, and we need to stand our ground and take it back. It is good. Matter of fact, it is very good. And it's been completely distorted in this world. And we've got to stand